Yo, 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 yo. Yet again, the chat is not working, so I need to put the chat up on internet. Hopefully that'll work. Hey Zelin, how's it going? But Atsuki stole it. Oh, goddamn, Atsuki. Thief in the night. Hey Axolotl. How's it going? Happy Friday. Yet another Friday. It's good stuff. There's crazy winds here in Northern Europe. Like storm warnings going out in Sweden, and wind is blowing like crazy. Birds are like having problems flying in a straight line. I can see them like being thrown around. Hey Mel, how's it going? Hello, good sir. I hate my hair. I asked my wife, like, should I just shave it? Shave it all off. She was like, no. I think she wouldn't love me if I shaved my hair. But the day will come when I need to, like all men do. Do it, I know. Exactly. I'll just look her dead in the eyes and just shave in the middle of the living room floor. Just blank. How's it going, Fight Milk? Any topic suggestions? And by the way, my daughter is, you're gonna hear her in the background, just so you know. She's not in a good mood. I can hear her through the office door. And if I can hear her, you can hear her. Nectar eater. That's a cool topic. Hopefully we get a cool range of topics. Otherwise, I'll happily paint nectar eater. I think with this technique I used yesterday and day before yesterday, the Fat Jester and Magic Magister or whatever it was called. I think it pinpoints a really interesting thing people need to think about. So I'll try to demonstrate that or think about that today. We'll see. I'm fine, thanks, Fight Milk. It's a bit crazy. We are obviously worried for the virus and my daughter, as my daughter is in a risk group. So we're taking strict precautions when we're coming home from outside and stores and so on. Hopefully all this is good on your end. So we got Nectar Eater and Skeleton Detector. Skeleton Doctor, not Detector. Alright, we got two topics. It seems like we only got two topics today, so let's roll the dice. Split it in half. 1 to 3 is Nectar Eater. 4 to 6 is Skeleton Detector. Nectar Eater. That's pretty cool. Alright, Atsuki stole it. And Atsuki stole the first good morning. Nectar Eater. Alright. So, Nectar Eater. Okay. I'm kind of. I'm kind of struggling with an idea of how to execute it, right? So the idea is a monster, like let's say this is the flower, and the monster has kind of crawled up the flower, and with his thing like sucking the nectar out of the flower, but it's like a weird monster. I think I want to paint that, but I was thinking, is that a cool enough idea? Is that more straightforward? Is that uninteresting? But I think if I overcomplicate it, it will be weird. I mean, I could put it on top of a beehive with this exact same thing, and it sucks the bee out of the beehive. I think that would, like put the idea a little bit more entertaining, perhaps. Hey, Lana, how's it going? Welcome. Good morning. So I think I'll do the beehive with the nectar. What was it? Nectar eater, and that'll like put the idea further. The execution will be the same. And I'm going to try to discuss this thing about what I see a lot of people do, mistakes in framing using this new technique I'm exploring. I'm going to try to do that, right? So let's see. So first of all, the picture in my head was, actually, let's not do selections this time. Let's do it differently. Let's do it with a hard brush. So the picture in my head was more or less this oversized creature bug of sorts with the what's it called? That mosquitoes suck blood with. What's that actually called? Straw? No, it's not called a straw, right? If you are a creature with a straw for a mouth, what's that straw called? A toot? I have no idea. Let's have it kind of collapsing a bit. Let's try to make it a little bit more organic. I felt yesterday the hard edges were cool, but it worked well for what's it called? Environment, like it was a dude on a stairs, but all right. So one of the things, like I wanted to mention, which I've kind of messed up already on, is if we think about like yesterday's, no, the jester, Caprison, Proboscis. Is it called proboscis now? I have no idea. Anyways, so we think about the jester. Aski, that's pretty wicked, man. That itself is a really cool concept art waiting to be made. All right, so one thing I wanted to mention about, if you think about the fat jester, right, about how I set that scene up, And now we got multiple objects in the scene. One thing that a lot of people make the mistake of is framing things like they're not intersecting with each other, right? So there's a good example on Discord at the moment of people doing that mistake, especially in Unreal Bjorn 3, is when they have a complex frame or complex image. It's very easy that with the complex image you are scared of there's always this tendency of being too scared to make a move, in that sense of like, as an example, like now I put the nectar eater on top of the beehive, and certain parts overlapping, certain parts are behind, and with these simple shapes alone, we can start seeing the interaction in between the shapes. Even without any details, we can start seeing, you know, like, are the shapes interesting enough? Are the negative space, positive and negative shapes or spaces? Negative shapes being the gap, right? The holes where the model or the subject is, and the space in between them. Are that interesting? Versus the actual spaces or the things that you're painting. Are that shape itself also good enough, right? And then you can start judging it by where is it placed on the picture. You know, is it dynamic enough? Is it interesting enough in ways of how it's placed? You can also then start testing, you know, with crops, scaling. One of my issues in this picture is that he's dead in center. As you can see, he's dead in center, and it looks not very pleasing to the eye because it's very dead on. Which that itself is a problem of over-explaining the subject or the image, right? If you would be a photographer, it would be like, don't, right? You can do that by thinking, you know, this is not the goal. This is not like a universal rule that you always have to apply. But if you think about, if like you split the image in even squares, kind of, this is you can see that each intersection here, I have almost points of interest. And what that makes it is that it makes it very straight, very dead on, and very kind of like a balanced image. So I save the image by having the nectar eater off center in a dynamic position. Otherwise everything would come across quite stiff and dead. And when you take all of those things together, you got to start considering like framing the image, framing the interaction of the subject versus negative spaces. Hey Fuxi, how's it going? So you got to start taking those things in consideration in how you're framing your painting and how you're framing your subject and how you're making them interact with each other, and where are points of contrast versus points of ease. like where it's kind of in the same principle like with this, like how balanced is the image, where are the points of interest. We could almost go here if we would analyze this, right? So the image now is split in four because we have made a kind of a square image with the focal point is dead on center, and then we can look at points of interest here, right? We could decide that number 4 down here should be the strongest contrast point, which is I don't want that because the focal point is here actually. So what we could do is, like, we can think about, we want the eye to go like that, but the shape itself wants us to go like this. So what we can do is we can soften this edge, let that be soft. So we are starting to travel to trying to find a hard edge. We can put the hard edge here, but we can have the ultimate words highest point of contrast here. So that means kind of a lost edge, or a normal edge, lost edge, firm edge, and hard edge. And that way we can guide the eye through while we are reading the major forms like that. And then in that sense you can start kind of planning your image. But all of these things, they have to go together. They have to be thought about on each step of the process. That's why I kind of prompted you guys to start thinking about how you do things. What steps do you take in order for you to create a good enough image, right? What steps do you make to when you're happy creating? And because ideally you will have found an answer where you can say, oh, I do this usually when I paint, when I'm having fun, when I make a good painting, I do these steps, right? So in that sense, that when you understand what you're doing, you can also start infusing new thoughts in, or new processes in your creative process. So in this instance, for example, like I've been playing around with how I draw things in order to be able to explain certain steps and showcase certain thoughts I'm having with form and texture and negative space and composition and so on. And doing it in this way, which I've been doing last 2 days, this is the 3rd day, is a easy and straightforward way of mapping out the image, understanding how you read the forms. Like yesterday's painting with Amir, yesterday's painting with the Magister, right? A lot of forms, like in this instance the monster creates an interesting form. Yesterday's painting, the forms themselves weren't that interesting because all of them were overlapping. There was no depth in the image in the sense of a character like this, or like interesting ins and outs of forms that creates the silhouette. All the shapes were pancaked on top of each other, and only form differences could make an interesting painting. So in that sense, you had to create an interesting image based on other solutions. While here, a lot of the interesting solution to the painting is actually silhouette. Like if you would switch that off, that's still some. I mean, I'm not saying that's the most amazing shape ever made by man, but it's still an interesting shape compared to yesterday's, where a lot of interest was created by the interaction of light within the forms. The negative spaces of the forms themselves weren't that interesting. So that could, that's a valid, I think that's a very poignant, important point to think about. Is not only do you need to consider the shapes themselves, not only do you need to consider the negative spaces they create, but also how they relate to each other in a picture kind of way. So I've seen a lot of, over the years, the difference between a good illustrator and a bad illustrator is the framing of the subjects, is the placement of the subjects. Hey Lana. Yeah, that's a good move, strong move. Go to Discord. Is the framing of the subjects, like I tried to explain at the beginning of this, right? I placed it in a dynamic way. One of my flaws in this image is that the image itself is dead on. Like if you would photograph this in a, make a pretty painting, you wouldn't put him dead on, right? You would move the camera, you would maybe lean back down a little bit, or make it exciting. But I also wanted to do a dead on shot to explain the idea of how you can make it work. And one of the hardest things to do is to use a square canvas to make it look interesting, right? You really need to stretch your legs in terms of compositional skills if you use a square canvas, because square canvas by default is a very awkward proportion. It's not geared towards the golden ratio. And an easy way to find the golden ratio in any format is to take the shortest side and you fold it down. And when you folded it down, the tip of that point is the golden ratio. So as you can see in this painting, the golden ratio is at the very bottom. Like if you would put things here, they would have a dynamic aspect to them. But because this is more or less a square format, the golden ratio is shot, right? But if we would think that this is the canvas, whoa, that's the canvas. We could make a line. This is like the rough way of getting the golden ratio, right? Then that would be the golden ratio. So if you would make a guy with a gun stand at this position in the frame, it would have a nice charge to it, right? Comparatively to put him in there, the gun gets too close to the edge. He has all this dead space behind him, and we start questioning why. But right here, right, it's like the sweet spot, kind of makes it look interesting to look at by default. So in other words, with a square format, you need to use different kinds of tools, different kind of tricks to make a composition more attractive. And there's going to be a lot more weight put on shapes, relationships between the shapes, and the deep information within the painting. So a lot of beginning mistakes you see is that, like I said, they don't overlap forms. They have a tendency to have the forms scared of each other. Like they almost touch each other, but there's no interaction between them, like overlap, right? Like, you can make someone do magic by having the hand above the magic, right? Like, oh look, they're creating magic, yes. But maybe the best solution is to like have the hand like this, or have the magic behind, or whatever you can come up with. But instinctively, you wouldn't want to overlap it, right? Because you want to show them like that. Oh, look at the magic and the. But maybe the best picture is, general rule is that they should overlap, they should interact, they should be shape-wise, they should be a good solution to it. But also keeping in mind that just because that rule exists is that you don't need to be a slave to it. There's always different solutions to the same different solutions to one problem. But it's very common to see, like I said, mistakes like this done in a lot of beginners or novice people's paintings. Is like this. I label it all into a statement of saying over explaining an image. It's almost like those like a family photo, just if you take up a camera or photograph real life, but you're a great photographer, you'd see a lot of complicated forms and shapes versus like class photo where they're all like standing straight and looking in, everyone is looking into the camera, there's no motion, there's no overlap, everyone has to be explained equally. The light is usually nondescript, very clean, basic light. Everything is very explained, and it's just dead photos. That for me is like how easily to kill a painting is to over explain everything, over arrange, or having the forms being scared of interacting with each other, composition being very explanatory. There's no life to it, there's no dynamics to it, it's all just flat image. So for example, like if you would think about this image, if you would think about that image in the same way, if I would redraw it, if I would want to do compositional explorations in how different could I make this picture, only by these topics alone, like that I've talked about, we could start generating completely different approaches to the same picture. We could, example, tilt the camera. We could look in a different angle. We could put him differently on the canvas. And that we could generate a lot of different images based on that alone without changing this design. I mean, obviously this is just not really a design, this is just a kind of a monster, right? No, but anyways, if we wouldn't change any of the moving pieces, we would only play around with placement and overlap and positioning of this monster and how we present it. We could definitely generate dramatically different pictures. That's one of the strengths of 3D, which 2D people don't have the benefit of, is that a 3D artist can move and place things compositionally without effort. I mean that sounds like it. There's no effort involved in making a composition in 3D. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that the actual act of moving the moving parts in an image, the actors of the image, you can arrange them more easily, because now if I would want to move this monster, I would need to cut it out. I would need to, while in 3D you can rotate the camera, you can place it differently, and if you want to practice composition, if you want to practice placing things interestingly in frame, 3D is actually a really, really strong subject, and there's a lot of different kind of challenges you can set yourself to see what you can do with 3D on composition. But one simple thing is that you only have let's say one default model in one default pose. Let's say it's a character standing, and you can rotate the camera, you can light it differently, you can put you can frame it in such a way where that one basic asset can look very differently, purely by not actually changing the geometry, but changing the composition. And it's a really, really good way to understand composition and how it works, and things to keep in mind when you're actually painting or drawing a composition. Because like I said, 3D and making a composition or exploring a composition is dramatically more efficient if you have a basic grasp of the 3D program and lens and lighting, and then you can start generating a lot of different ideas, and you can start like exercising your ability to frame a subject. But that being said, you can also do that in 2D. Is just that every time you want to change, you have to have the ability to try to reframe it in your mind, where you're actually not changing the subject or the objects, but you're actually just creating a new point of view or a new camera angle. And obviously you have to adhere to perspective and all these things in order to make it work. In 3D you get it all for free, or for free. Hey Weeping Jay, how's it going? Level 2 Bjornling, say my name. Nice. Strong move. I can see Amir he's reached the roof. He's level 12 and can go higher. At least on paper. You have room to improve. Yeah. But yeah, so that's an interesting thing. You can reverse engineer your painting if you're stuck. So you can go, oh, is my placement okay? Like, yeah, it's a bit boring in terms of positioning on the canvas. And then, okay, I'm stuck with this positioning because I've already, I can't I can't rejiggle. Or maybe you can crop the canvas differently and you get the offset. You can make it widescreen, or there's ways to make a painting more interesting. Then you could also have the issue lying in the interaction between the forms. You can go, oh, I need to move a character here, or I need to shift up the another gear in how they sit next to each other, or they are over explained, or they are over complicated, where maybe you need to simplify interaction between them, so that the negative space itself becomes interesting to look at. You know, like this is the exact same hand position that looks not very interesting. That's probably starting, you know, I'm not changing my fingers, but the way it's shown is different. So that's an easy way to, like, you can take a look at what you've produced and go, okay, where's the weak link? Like, where's the interaction? But like I also said, in the instances of placing this subject in a composition, like I have put this monster dead center in the frame, and it does create a very kind of explanatory, over-explained type framing, right? It's not that dramatic to look at, versus if I would do, you know, have a frame like that, that would be a way more interesting to look at, right? And this is very, very dead. But like I explained, like there are ways to deal with it. And there's a lot of mistakes you can make. So it's a very complicated subject. It's a very complicated thing to deal with. And you can make almost any situation work. Any, like, uphill start of a composition, you can find a solution to it, only if you are aware, number one, of the basic rules of composition, the basic things to think about, like placement, negative space, golden ratio, all these things, right? And then solutions that you can solve them, like this explanation, right? You analyze what you've done. How can I make it work? Oh, I can do these kind of things with edges to make the image more interesting to look at, and so on and so forth. And then you always have the cold shower of flipping an image. And then you go, ooh. Okay. One thing to keep in mind also, a lot of people in the West read from left to right. We read by default like this, like we read pages. And so there is a basic rule, compositional rules. There's a lot of them, especially in terms of character, where they're looking out or into the frame, or up or out of the frame, or, you know, where they're looking. But also there's a basic rule of, if they look at that way, they are with you. If they look that way, they're against you. So his head is with you, he's on your side, but his body is against you. So if someone is running that direction in an image, they're challenging. If someone is running that direction, they are on your side. They're your buddies. It all stems from that in the West we read books from left to right. In Arabic countries, they read them opposite direction. Say my name. The golden ratio is just a basic general idea of natural occurrence. This whole golden ratio Fibonacci sequence. I explained it in a talk that a leaf, for example, when growing out, it doesn't grow out equal sized. It grows out as a point. It shoots and then it segments. As every segment it does, the segment remaining builds bigger and the younger segment grows out thinner. But proportionally they can't be even because then the leaf will break. So there's a natural occurrence of golden ratio because it's a fundamental rule in structure and proven by evolution in nature that it's the best solution for things to grow. And golden ratio exists in the human body on that same principle. Like this point is like 1.6 times longer or shorter than this point, which is this point, which is that point, which is this point, and it's just a natural occurring proportion. And with paintings and so on, you can use that natural occurring proportion because we are used to it. It exists. We observe it, and that's the only reason why golden ratio works. Is because it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's not the end-all be-all of compositional tools. That's the only reason people use golden ratio, is because it exists, and anything square isn't beautiful by default because it's too balanced and too arranged. And we like I think one of them is that our brain stems from pattern recognition, and anything uniform we assimilate to one mass. So if something is very balanced, there's a repeating or in uniformity in balance. We just go one thing, I don't care. But we can easily spot the tiger's face because of the proportions and the shapes, versus the side of the tiger. If it would stand in there, we would just see the stripes. It would melt it would create uniformity. Say my name. Yeah, it's tricky, but there's rules to it. My level 2 Bjorn. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so it became a lesson of composition all of a sudden. But hopefully you might have picked something up from it. With this horrible drawing, a lot of explanation and very little painting. Yeah, but again, the points I've brought up in this stream is just like the surface of it, the basic rules to think about. There's rules that breaks it and rules that supports it, and it's more or less what you feel and how you can make it work. Or argue against the case as well. You can break a rule on purpose, but you also have to be aware of the rules in order to break them. Like placement on the canvas. If we thought about the composition thing, like what would happen if we would crop the image like that? Right? On purpose, he's now cut out of the frame. Like what does that do to the painting? Does it matter? Or what if we cut him like this? What does that do to the impression of him? But all we've done is crop him out of the picture a bit. So those are the things as well. You can break the rules in order to make a statement of things you should and shouldn't do, right? Fight Milk being bilingual of yeah, you speak Arabic and English. Because you read, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Arabic text bottom right to top left. And we obviously read the other way around. But yeah, let's find someone to raid. Enough talking. Shut up, Bjorn. Okay, let's try to kill Tim Rammers. Top right, bottom left. All right, there we go. All right, have a great day, everyone. Have a good night if you're that part of the world. See you guys on Monday morning for Study Monday. I might stream over the weekend. I am not sure. It all depends on how everything else is. You got approximately 2 days left of round 2 for Unreal Bjornament. So make sure that you keep on deadline. There is a function on Discord and in chat. You can type deadline and you get the time remaining. There's also time remaining on the stream, but I won't stream most likely again until round 2 is over, so keep an eye out and let people know. Anyways, outro. Tools.